Lena had always been quiet about her past. She moved through life like any ordinary person, working, laughing with friends, and keeping to herself. On the surface, she seemed like someone you could easily underestimate. She wasn't loud, she didn't boast, and she never drew attention. But there was a side to her that very few people knew, a life wrapped in shadows and secrecy. For years, she had worked in places where most people wouldn't dare go, doing things that were dangerous and often impossible to explain. But to her friends and colleagues, none of that existed. They just saw the calm, polite woman who always knew how to handle herself with grace. Over time, people began noticing things, small, unusual details that didn't match the picture of a normal life. She had stories that hinted at experiences far beyond her age, knowledge of things most civilians never encountered, and reactions to situations that were sharper than anyone else's. She could move silently through a room, observe people without being noticed, and act decisively when something went wrong. Friends joked about her being mysterious or extraordinary, but when they pressed her for details, she always brushed it off with a soft smile. But one day, curiosity turned into doubt. Some friends began questioning her more directly, and some even laughed at her stories behind her back. "Come on, Lena, you expect us to believe that?" one of them asked. "You've got to show us proof. Otherwise, it's just a story." Others nodded in agreement, echoing the same demand. What started as playful curiosity became insistence. People didn't just want to hear about her past. They wanted evidence, something tangible, something undeniable. Lena felt the weight of their doubt like a heavy cloud. She knew that revealing too much could be dangerous. The life she had led was built on secrecy. One wrong word could compromise more than just her safety. The missions she had been a part of were classified at the highest level, involving people and operations that the public could never know about. She had seen things that would shock anyone, and yet she was expected to prove it to a group of people who had no idea what it really meant. The pressure was intense, but she didn't panic. Instead, Lena thought carefully. She understood human nature, the need to see something with one's own eyes, to touch or witness proof before believing. Words alone were never enough. She remembered past experiences where she had been underestimated, laughed at, or dismissed because of her quiet demeanor and lack of self-promotion. And yet, those same experiences had taught her patience, strategy, and the art of waiting for the right moment. Every time someone demanded proof, a small smile played on her lips. They didn't know that they were challenging someone who had faced dangers far beyond what they could imagine. They didn't know that she had spent countless nights in the dark, moving through enemy territory, making decisions that could mean life or death, not just for herself, but for others. And they certainly didn't realize that proof didn't have to be flashy or dramatic. It could be subtle, hidden, and unforgettable when revealed at the perfect moment. Lena's mind wandered back to the early days of her training. She had been young, eager, and fiercely determined, but even then, she had learned the importance of keeping some things hidden. The world wasn't ready to see the full story, and sometimes the only people who truly understood were those who had shared the same experiences. She had tattoos, marks of service, and symbols of loyalty, things that spoke louder than any explanation could. But none of that could be shown lightly. It had to be done with thought and timing. Meanwhile, the people around her grew restless. Their laughter sometimes masked skepticism, and their curiosity became sharper, almost demanding. Some mocked her subtly, while others pressed for a more serious explanation. They wanted stories with proof, evidence that she wasn't just making things up. They didn't understand that some truths were too heavy, too secret, and too dangerous to be told casually. But the challenge excited Lena, not because she wanted to brag, but because she knew that one small reveal could silence all doubt. One moment could turn disbelief into respect, misunderstanding into awe. As the evening drew closer, Lena felt the tension in the air. Her friends and colleagues were gathering, unaware of what she was capable of. Their words and laughter rang in her mind, pushing her toward a decision. She didn't need to argue, didn't need to convince them with stories. She had learned long ago that action speaks louder than words, and sometimes it doesn't even require explanation. In that quiet, ordinary room filled with ordinary people, Lena carried a secret so extraordinary that it could change everything in a single moment. She felt calm, prepared, and ready. She knew that soon they would stop questioning her. They would see the truth without her saying a single word. And when that moment came, it wouldn't just be proof. It would be a revelation, one that none of them would ever forget. As the pressure to prove herself grew, Lena felt a familiar weight settle over her shoulders. The room seemed smaller somehow, as if the walls themselves were leaning in, filled with the curiosity and doubt of those around her. Every glance, every whispered comment reminded her that people didn't truly believe her. Some thought she was exaggerating. Others assumed she had made up her stories for attention. But Lena knew the truth, and the truth was far more dangerous, far more real than anyone could imagine. Her past was not something that could be easily shared. The missions she had been a part of were top secret, often life-threatening, and always invisible to the outside world. She had walked through shadowy alleys in foreign cities, infiltrated guarded compounds, and faced situations where one mistake could cost not only her life but the lives of others. It was a world that required complete silence, trust in unseen allies, and nerves of steel. Lena understood that revealing too much could compromise operations that were still active, put her former teammates at risk, and even endanger innocents who had nothing to do with the secrets she carried. Yet, the insistence of her friends and colleagues weighed on her. Their questions were relentless, repeated at every opportunity. How do we know it's real? Show us proof, Lena. Just a little proof. She had learned to smile politely in response, to nod, to act as if she understood their disbelief. But inside, there was a fire, a mix of frustration and determination. She knew that proof had to be given carefully. Words alone would not convince them. They needed to see something undeniable, something that could not be dismissed as a story or a lie. Lena began thinking about subtle ways to give them a hint, to let them understand without breaking the rules of secrecy she had lived by for years. She considered what small truths could be shared, knowledge of techniques, references to locations, or hints in the way she moved and acted. Every step had to be calculated. The smallest slip could reveal too much. She had trained her entire life for this kind of precision, and now that skill would serve her once more. As she planned, memories of her missions returned vividly. She remembered nights in the desert, lying flat against the cold sand, heart pounding as enemy patrols passed meters away. She recalled the moments when she had to make split-second decisions, weighing the lives of her team against the mission objectives. She thought about the times she had carried secrets heavier than any backpack, secrets that no one would ever know, secrets that could have destroyed her if spoken aloud. All of these experiences had shaped her, teaching her patience, control, and the importance of timing. Meanwhile, the people around her grew more impatient. They wanted answers now, proof now, not tomorrow. Some even mocked her subtly, testing her, trying to provoke a reaction. "Come on, Lena, everyone's waiting. Show us you're telling the truth," they said. Others exchanged glances, whispering doubts that reached her ears despite her efforts to ignore them. The challenge was clear. They didn't trust her, and she couldn't let mere words convince them. Lena realized something important. This was not about bragging or proving superiority. It was about being understood, about showing a glimpse of a life that had always been hidden. It was about commanding respect for experiences no one else could ever claim. She smiled inwardly, thinking about how ironic it was. The very people who doubted her were completely unaware of the depth of her courage, the precision of her training, and the sacrifices she had made. Yet, she knew that one small action could change their perception forever. The pressure built, but so did her resolve. Lena understood that revealing her past had to be done on her terms. Could not be rushed or forced. She had to wait for the right moment, when the disbelief around her had reached its peak, and when a single reveal could silence every doubt in an instant. She had learned this lesson long ago during her missions. Timing was everything. A poorly timed action could lead to failure, disaster, or exposure. As the night drew closer and the room filled with expectation, Lena prepared herself mentally. She could feel the tension in the air, a mix of skepticism, curiosity, and impatience. Her friends and colleagues were eager, almost desperate, for proof, and yet they didn't understand that what they demanded could not be given casually. Some truths were meant to be revealed slowly, carefully, with precision. She took a deep breath and reminded herself of who she was and what she had endured. Lena had faced danger, secrecy, and disbelief before, and each time, she had emerged stronger. This was just another challenge, another test, but this time it was not against enemies in distant lands. It was against doubt and ignorance in the people closest to her. She knew that the moment would come when everything would be revealed. And when it did, it would be undeniable. For now, Lena remained calm, composed, and patient. She let their questions roll off her like water, knowing that their persistence was only making the eventual reveal more powerful. She didn't need to argue or explain. She simply had to wait, and when the time was right, the truth would speak louder than words ever could. The proof existed, hidden but unmistakable, and it would leave no room for doubt when it finally appeared. Even though Lena had stayed quiet for so long, people around her were beginning to notice things. Small hints, little details that didn't fit the picture of a normal, everyday life, started to surface. She moved differently than most people. Her steps were deliberate. Her eyes always seemed to notice things others missed. And her reactions in tricky situations were faster and sharper than anyone expected. Friends began whispering among themselves, asking, "How does she know that?" Or "Where did she learn this?" Lena never answered directly. She just smiled, almost teasingly, as if she were keeping a secret they could never guess. Her subtle hints were careful and calculated. She dropped pieces of her story, but only enough to make people curious without giving anything away. She would talk casually about places she had visited, mentioning cities and towns with a knowledge that seemed too detailed for a tourist. She referenced techniques and strategies almost in passing, in ways that only someone trained would recognize. To most people, it seemed like coincidence or luck. But for those paying attention, there was something different in her tone, something that hinted at a life lived far outside ordinary experience. Her colleagues and friends were starting to feel that tension between curiosity and disbelief. Every time Lena spoke, they hung on her words, trying to catch hidden clues. "Did she really do that?" someone would whisper. "It sounds impossible." But Lena never confirmed or denied anything. She understood the power of mystery. People always wanted what they couldn't fully understand. The more they pressed, the more intrigued they became, and that was exactly the effect she intended. She had learned long ago that subtlety was stronger than direct proof. If she revealed everything too quickly, the impact would be lost. The thrill of discovery, the awe that came from realizing the truth for oneself, was far more powerful than any explanation or story. Every hint she gave had a purpose. A glance here, a reference there, a small demonstration of skill. All of it was carefully measured to prepare for the moment when real proof would finally appear. Yet the skepticism around her was relentless. Some people openly doubted her stories, thinking they were exaggerations or fabrications. "Come on, Lena, you expect us to believe that?" they would say. Others laughed at her cryptic behavior, thinking she was playing some kind of joke. But Lena remained calm, never showing irritation or fear. She had faced situations far more dangerous than doubt, far more challenging than people questioning her. The disbelief of friends and colleagues was nothing compared to what she had already survived. In her private moments, Lena thought about the delicate balance she had to maintain. If she revealed too much, she risked exposing herself and others. If she revealed too little, no one would ever understand the truth. She remembered her past missions, where careful observation and small gestures had saved lives. Every detail mattered and every movement had meaning. It was the same now. Her life was a puzzle, and every hint she dropped was a piece that would eventually form a complete picture, but only when the timing was perfect. As days passed, Lena's hints became more deliberate. She spoke about tactical maneuvers in a casual way, almost jokingly, and mentioned survival techniques that seemed out of place in everyday conversation. She would glance at objects and situations with a sharpness that made people uneasy, sensing things they didn't even notice. Friends and colleagues began to notice patterns, little signs that hinted at something hidden, something extraordinary. But even then, most couldn't put it together. They were drawn in by her subtlety, but they still didn't have the courage or the knowledge to fully believe what they were seeing. The tension was growing, but Lena was in control. She understood human curiosity and the way people reacted to mystery. The more they questioned, the more invested they became. Every skeptical comment, every whisper, only made the eventual reveal more powerful. She let them try to decipher her life, knowing that their frustration and curiosity would make the moment of proof unforgettable. Sometimes she allowed herself small tests. She would make a reference that seemed ordinary but carried hidden meaning. Those with sharp eyes might notice, but most would not. She watched their reactions carefully, gauging who was close to understanding and who was still far from the truth. This game of observation and subtlety thrilled her. It was almost like training all over again, except the stakes were different. Here, the stakes were trust, belief, and awe. Through it all, Lena remained calm, composed, and confident. She didn't rush, didn't panic, and never allowed doubt to shake her. She knew that the hints she had been leaving were building anticipation, preparing everyone for a moment that would leave no room for disbelief. One small gesture, one reveal, and everything would change. People would no longer question her. They would see the truth in a way that words alone could never convey. Every action, every word, every small hint was part of a larger plan. Lena was not simply teasing or showing off. She was crafting a story that would prove itself without explanation. The tension in the room, the curiosity in her friend's eyes, and the whispers behind her back were all signs that her plan was working. She had created a world where mystery met reality, where disbelief was about to meet undeniable truth. Lena knew that soon the time would come. Soon they would no longer guess, no longer doubt. Her subtle hints had set the stage. The proof was already there, hidden and ready. When she revealed it, it would be unforgettable, powerful, and unquestionable. And in that moment, everyone would understand the truth about the extraordinary life she had lived. A life few could imagine and none could deny. The day finally came when Lena could no longer avoid it. The curiosity and skepticism of her friends and colleagues had reached a peak. They surrounded her, not with playful questions this time, but with direct confrontation. Their voices were a mix of disbelief, impatience, and almost challenge. "Lena, we've had enough hints. Tell us the truth. Show us proof," one of them said, leaning forward as if pressing too hard might force her to break. Others nodded, echoing the same demand. The energy in the room was tense, a mix of frustration and anticipation that Lena could almost feel vibrating in the air. Despite the intensity, Lena remained calm. She had faced pressure before, not from friends, not from casual skeptics, but from life or death situations where every move mattered. This, in comparison, was nothing. She didn't need to argue, defend herself, or beg for understanding. She had learned that proof wasn't given through words. Proof came from action and presence. And in this moment, she had all the control. Her friends and colleagues, however, didn't see it that way. They were used to confrontation, used to pressing for answers, and used to getting what they wanted. They didn't understand that Lena's world was different, that the rules she lived by, the code she followed, demanded patience, secrecy, and precision. Their disbelief made them impatient, but that impatience only heightened the suspense, making her eventual reveal all the more powerful. Lena thought back to the lessons she had learned in her training. She remembered missions where revealing too much too soon had cost teams dearly, where silence and timing were everything. Even in the face of danger, she had learned to wait for the exact right moment, to act with precision and confidence. This was no different. The confrontation in front of her was just another test. A test of patience, control, and the perfect timing for the reveal that would leave no room for doubt. She looked around the room, studying the faces of those who demanded answers. Some were curious, leaning in, eyes wide with anticipation. Others were skeptical, arms crossed, trying to appear unconvinced. A few were almost mocking, laughing softly as if this were all a joke. Lena noticed everything. The nervous shifting of feet, the tightening of hands, the way their eyes darted around, trying to find cracks in her calm demeanor. She allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile. They didn't know what they were about to witness. The confrontation grew more intense as the minutes passed. Voices rose slightly, questions became more insistent, and some even demanded explanations for the smallest inconsistencies in her past stories. "If you're telling the truth, prove it," someone shouted. Lena didn't flinch. She didn't argue. She simply stood there, quiet, letting the tension build naturally. She knew that the more they demanded, the more dramatic and undeniable the proof would seem when it finally appeared. Internally, Lena was calm but alert. Her mind moved through strategies, considering how best to reveal what could not be spoken aloud. The proof she carried was not a story, a document, or a photograph. It was something far more personal, far more permanent. It was a symbol of everything she had endured, everything she had sacrificed, and everything that made her who she was. Words could never capture its significance. Only when it was revealed would the truth hit like a wave, undeniable and unforgettable. The room seemed to grow quieter, almost as if they were all holding their collective breath. They didn't realize that the confrontation had played exactly into her hands. Their insistence, their doubt, their inability to accept her story without proof. These were all elements that set the stage for a reveal that would leave no room for skepticism. Every challenge they presented only made the eventual moment stronger, more shocking, and more persuasive. Then, Lena shifted slightly, a small movement that was almost imperceptible. She didn't speak, didn't raise her voice, didn't respond to their questions. Her silence was deliberate, a tool as sharp and effective as any weapon she had ever carried. The room felt the change immediately. There was a pause, a quiet ripple of confusion and anticipation. Their impatience now mixed with uncertainty. What was she about to do? Could she actually prove everything she had claimed without a single word? Lena could feel the moment approaching, the precise, perfect moment she had been waiting for. Her heart beat steadily, not from fear but from the thrill of control. She had navigated countless impossible situations in the past, and this was no different. The confrontation in front of her was merely a challenge of patience and timing. She would give proof, yes, but not on their schedule, not by their rules. She would reveal the truth on her terms, with a quiet power that demanded acknowledgement without question. As the group continued to press her, Lena remained unshaken. Each question, each demand, only reinforced her resolve. The proof existed, hidden but ready. Soon, the disbelief in the room would be replaced by awe. Soon, their questions would stop, replaced by silent recognition. And in that moment, Lena would no longer need to explain herself. Her life, her experiences, and her sacrifices would speak for her. Loudly, clearly, and without dispute. The confrontation had reached its peak. Everyone was waiting, tense and eager, but Lena was the one in control. She didn't need to raise her voice, justify her story, or plead for belief. The proof would come, and when it did, it would change everything. The skeptics, the doubters, the mocking voices, they would all understand in a single, undeniable moment. And Lena, as always, would emerge calm, composed, and completely in command of the situation. For a long moment, Lena stood quietly, letting the tension fill the room. The faces around her were a mixture of curiosity, disbelief, and impatience. They didn't realize how close they were to the truth, how the proof they demanded had been with her all along. She had planned this moment carefully, and now everything was perfectly aligned. The room was silent, the air thick with expectation. And then, slowly, deliberately, Lena moved. Her hand went to the zipper of her jacket. The motion was calm, controlled, and precise, but it drew the attention of everyone in the room immediately. They leaned forward instinctively, sensing that something significant was about to happen. The casual hints and cryptic stories had led up to this moment, and now, at last, the truth would begin to reveal itself. Lena's fingers worked steadily, and she pulled the jacket down, just enough to expose the upper part of her back. What was revealed next made the room go silent in a way that no one had expected. Across Lena's back, perfectly etched in dark, precise ink, was a tattoo. But it wasn't just any tattoo. It was a symbol used exclusively by elite Black Ops operatives, a mark that spoke of missions completed, loyalty maintained, and sacrifices made that no outsider could ever truly understand. The design was intricate, composed of sharp lines and coded symbols, each element carrying meaning and history. It was more than art. It was identity, history, and authority rolled into one. The reactions were immediate and intense. Some of her friends gasped, some took a step back, and some simply stared, unable to process what they were seeing. "Is that real?" someone whispered, almost afraid to speak. Another shook their head, clearly in disbelief, while a few just blinked rapidly, trying to make sense of what their eyes were telling them. The tattoo wasn't something that could be faked or exaggerated. Anyone familiar with military symbols, especially those used in secretive operations, would recognize it instantly. Lena watched the reactions carefully. She had expected shock, awe, and disbelief, but even she was slightly amused by the intensity of it. These people had demanded proof, but proof had never been about photographs, letters, or stories. It had been here all along, etched permanently on her skin, waiting for the perfect moment. She could see the realization beginning to dawn on them, creeping slowly like sunlight through clouds. What they had doubted so strongly was now undeniable. For those unfamiliar with the symbol, it might have looked like an unusual or complex design. But to the few who knew its significance, it was a powerful confirmation of Lena's claims. It spoke of covert training, extreme missions, and unwavering loyalty. It told stories of nights spent in darkness, navigating enemy territory, and completing tasks that demanded courage most could not even imagine. Every line, every shape, every element of the tattoo carried meaning, though none of it needed to be explained. Its presence alone was enough to silence doubt. The room, once filled with demands and skepticism, had become heavy with awe. The energy shifted immediately. What had been impatience turned into respect. Disbelief transformed into recognition. Lena's calm presence, paired with this one undeniable symbol, had done what words could never have accomplished. She didn't speak, didn't gesture, didn't add explanation. The tattoo spoke for her. It carried authority, experience, and truth in a way that was impossible to question. Some of the onlookers tried to rationalize it. Maybe it's just a decorative tattoo, one person suggested, though their voice was unsure. Another said, "I've never seen that design before. Maybe it's something personal." But the truth was evident to those who understood the signs. This was not something casual, not a piece of art for decoration. It was a badge of extreme accomplishment, of a life lived in secrecy and danger. Lena could see the thought process in their eyes, the moment when doubt begins to crumble, when disbelief starts to be replaced by the understanding that the person before you is far more extraordinary than you ever imagined. She allowed herself a small smile. This had been the plan all along. Subtle hints, patience, timing, and then this reveal. One small, deliberate action that changed everything. As the realization spread through the room, Lena felt a sense of satisfaction. She had not needed to argue, to shout, or to plead. She had not needed to list accomplishments, recount missions, or provide evidence in the conventional sense. All she had done was show the symbol, the permanent proof of her life and experience. It was a moment of undeniable clarity, one that left no room for skepticism. The awe in the room was palpable. Eyes were wide, breaths caught, and even the most skeptical were forced to pause, acknowledge, and respect. Some began to ask questions, not to challenge her, but to understand, to learn more about the life she had lived. Others simply remained silent, absorbing the weight of the moment. The impact of the tattoo was more powerful than Lena could have hoped. It was simple yet absolute. She took a slow step back, allowing the room to settle. The proof was no longer a concept or a story. It was visible, undeniable, and permanent. The disbelief, the challenges, and the demands had all been answered in the quiet, controlled motion of revealing her back. Lena had not just shown a tattoo. She had revealed a lifetime of courage, secrecy, and commitment. And in that moment, she became more than just a friend or colleague. She became someone whose experiences commanded respect, whose story could not be questioned, and whose life had finally been understood by those around her. The moment Lena revealed her tattoo, the room went completely silent. For a few seconds, no one spoke, no one moved. All they could do was stare at her back, trying to process what they were seeing. The design wasn't just intricate, it was unmistakable. Anyone with even a small knowledge of military operations would have recognized it immediately. But even those who didn't understand the symbol felt its weight. There was something in the lines, the angles, and the precision that screamed discipline, experience, and authority. It was a mark of someone who had lived a life far beyond ordinary understanding. Some people instinctively took a step back, almost as if afraid to intrude on the proof before them. Their faces were a mixture of shock, awe, and something approaching fear. They had doubted her, teased her, questioned her, and now all that disbelief had evaporated. What they were witnessing was more than just a tattoo. It was a silent declaration of a life lived in extreme secrecy, in situations they couldn't even imagine. Lena could feel their eyes on her, the weight of their realization settling in slowly. The people who were familiar with covert operations, even minimally, were the first to understand. Their eyes widened as recognition hit them. This was no ordinary mark. It was a symbol of black ops, a sign that the person before them had undergone training, faced danger, and completed missions that demanded courage, skill, and sacrifice. They knew the meaning instantly, and their respect shifted from theoretical to absolute. Even the most skeptical were forced to pause and reconsider everything they had doubted. Lena didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Her quiet confidence, paired with the undeniable proof on her back, spoke louder than anything she could have said. The room, once filled with chatter, laughter, and doubt, was now thick with a sense of gravity. People began exchanging glances, silently acknowledging that the woman in front of them was extraordinary. The disbelief and mockery they had once felt were replaced by awe and recognition. Some tried to rationalize it to make it seem less remarkable, but their attempts fell flat. "Maybe it's just a tattoo," one person muttered, though the uncertainty in their voice betrayed them. "It's just art, right?" another said, hoping to downplay what they were seeing. But to anyone with knowledge, even a little, the design was unmistakable. Every line, every detail was a code of experience, a map of secret missions, a symbol of honor among those who served in the most dangerous and covert operations. This was not decoration, not a random design. It was a story etched in ink, carrying decades of skill and sacrifice. The silence stretched on as people struggled to absorb it. Some couldn't speak, some could only stare, and some simply nodded slowly, as if coming to terms with the reality before them. Their disbelief had been shattered. Their skepticism had no ground to stand on. Lena had not just told them the truth. She had shown it in a way that demanded acknowledgement. The impact was more powerful than any explanation, more convincing than any words could have been. Lena could sense the shift in energy. Respect replaced doubt. Curiosity replaced mockery. The people who had once laughed at her now looked at her with something approaching reverence. They realized that she had lived a life that none of them could even imagine. She had faced dangers they had only seen in movies or heard about in stories. She had undergone training and experiences that were beyond comprehension. And here she was, calm, composed, and quietly commanding the room, proving everything without uttering a single word. Some of them began to ask questions carefully, respectfully. Not challenging questions, not demands for proof anymore, but questions meant to understand. Where did you learn this?" one asked, voice trembling slightly. Another whispered, How could you do this and come back?" Lena responded with a small, knowing smile. She didn't need to provide details that could compromise secrets. The tattoo alone was enough. It told the story without speaking it aloud. Those who understood would know everything they needed to know. Those who didn't would still recognize the significance and courage it represented. The awe in the room was almost tangible. It was as if time itself had slowed, giving everyone a chance to process the magnitude of what they were seeing. Lena's quiet composure contrasted sharply with the reactions around her. highlighting the difference between someone who had lived through unimaginable experiences and those who had merely witnessed them from a safe distance. Her presence, combined with the undeniable proof etched on her back, left no room for doubt. Even the most vocal skeptics eventually fell silent, recognizing the truth they had refused to see. Some looked at each other in disbelief, silently acknowledging that Lena was not exaggerating, not joking, and not lying. She had faced challenges, dangers, and missions that none of them could ever comprehend. And she had emerged not only alive but unshaken, calm, and quietly powerful. Lena's proof had done more than validate her stories. It had changed the way people saw her. She was no longer just a quiet, unassuming woman. She was someone extraordinary, someone who had lived a life that demanded respect, admiration, and awe. In that moment, everyone in the room understood it, whether they had known the symbol before or not. The disbelief, the doubts, and the teasing had vanished, replaced by recognition of her courage, skill, and unwavering strength. The revelation of the tattoo was a turning point. Lena had achieved something more powerful than any explanation or argument could have accomplished. She had proven her truth in a way that could not be ignored or dismissed. And as the room settled into a respectful silence, she stood there, calm, collected, and in complete control, knowing that her secret life had finally been acknowledged, even if only in part, by those around her. After the initial shock of seeing Lena's tattoo, the room began to settle, but the energy had shifted completely. The disbelief and doubt that had filled the air moments ago were replaced by something entirely different: respect, awe, and a growing understanding of the life she had led. People who had once mocked her or questioned her honesty now looked at her with a mixture of admiration and caution. They had demanded proof, and she had given it. Not through words, not through stories, but through something undeniable and permanent. The transformation in the room was remarkable. Friends who had been skeptical were now silent, their expressions softening as they absorbed the reality of what they were seeing. Even those who had been quietly curious but hesitant to believe now realized that Lena's experiences were real. The tattoo was more than ink on skin. It was a badge of courage, a symbol of commitment, and a story of sacrifice that could not be disputed. Those who understood its significance nodded slightly to each other, an unspoken acknowledgement passing between them. Some of Lena's colleagues took a cautious step forward, their voices trembling as they spoke. I didn't realize," one said, unable to finish the sentence. Another whispered, This is incredible. I can't believe it." Each word was filled with the awe that had replaced doubt. Lena's quiet presence, combined with the undeniable symbol on her back, had shifted their perception completely. She was no longer just a friend, a coworker, or someone they thought they knew. She was someone extraordinary, someone who had lived a life that demanded recognition and respect. Lena allowed herself a small smile, but she remained calm. She didn't need to explain further. The tattoo told the story. Every line and symbol represented experiences that words could never convey. It spoke of missions completed in secrecy, dangers faced with courage, and sacrifices made without recognition. For those who knew the meaning, it was a profound acknowledgement of what she had accomplished. For those who didn't, the symbol still carried weight, power, and authority that could not be ignored. The atmosphere in the room began to change in subtle ways. People straightened their posture, their attention now focused entirely on Lena. The whispers of doubt had disappeared, replaced by quiet murmurs of admiration. Some tried to ask questions, but they were careful, respectful questions now, not challenges or demands. They wanted to understand, to learn, and to appreciate the depth of her experience without pushing her beyond what she was willing to reveal. Lena observed all of this quietly, appreciating the moment. She had spent years training, risking her life, and living in the shadows. She had faced challenges that most people could not even imagine. And now, without a single word, she had earned the respect that had eluded her for so long. The tattoo had become more than proof. It had become a bridge between her secret life and the people around her. It was a silent story that spoke volumes, and it had changed everything in the room. Some people were visibly moved. A few wiped their eyes, struggling to comprehend the courage it must have taken for her to live the life she had. Others were quiet, staring at the tattoo as if they were trying to memorize it, to understand every line and detail. The realization that Lena had lived through unimaginable experiences, faced danger without hesitation, and carried the weight of secrecy for so long had a profound effect on everyone present. The respect they felt was deep, sincere, and lasting. Even those who had doubted her most vocally now approached her with caution, curiosity, and respect. I had no idea," one said quietly. Another asked, How did you do all of this?" Lena's smile remained gentle, patient. She didn't answer with words. She didn't need to. Her presence, her calmness, and the undeniable tattoo conveyed everything necessary. The truth was out, and it was accepted without question. In that moment, Lena felt a sense of peace and satisfaction. She had faced skepticism, doubt, and pressure, and she had handled it all with patience and precision. She had given proof, yes, but it had been done in a way that maintained her dignity and the secrecy of her past. The respect she now received was not forced. It was earned, undeniable, and complete. The realization that Lena's life had been extraordinary began to sink in for everyone around her. They understood that she had faced dangers they could never imagine, completed missions that required precision and courage beyond ordinary limits, and carried the weight of secrecy that few could endure. The tattoo on her back was no longer just a symbol. It was a story of resilience, bravery, and commitment, permanently visible for all to see. By the time the room had fully absorbed the revelation, the mood had completely shifted. Skepticism, teasing, and disbelief had vanished. What remained was acknowledgement, admiration, and respect. People who had once demanded proof now approached Lena with a quiet reverence, as if they were recognizing something sacred. They understood, at least in part, the extraordinary life she had led, and they knew that her experiences were beyond anything they could have imagined. For Lena, the moment was deeply satisfying, but she remained humble and composed. She had proven her truth, earned respect, and bridged the gap between her secret life and the world around her. And though the full depth of her experiences could never be fully known by anyone outside of her world, the acknowledgement she received in that room was enough. The disbelief had ended, replaced by admiration and understanding. In that quiet, intense moment, Lena's life had been validated. The tattoo had spoken for her, and the people around her now saw the truth, the courage, and the strength that she had carried all along. It was a moment of recognition that would not be forgotten, a turning point that marked the shift from doubt to respect, from curiosity to admiration, and from skepticism to acceptance. After the moment of revelation, the room felt lighter but charged with a new energy. The disbelief that had weighed on Lena for so long had vanished, replaced by admiration, respect, and a sense of awe. People who had once doubted her now approached her with a quiet reverence, their questions no longer demanding proof but seeking understanding. They were beginning to realize that she was not just someone who told incredible stories. She was someone who had truly lived them. Lena herself felt a sense of calm satisfaction. She had been challenged, doubted, and pressured, yet she had faced it all with patience and precision. She had revealed the truth on her own terms, maintaining the secrecy that had defined her life while providing undeniable proof that left no room for skepticism. The tattoo on her back had done what words could never have accomplished. It had told the story of her life, her missions, and her sacrifices in a way that everyone present could understand. As she looked around, Lena saw a subtle shift in the way people interacted with her. Friends who had once whispered behind her back now spoke to her with newfound respect. Colleagues who had mocked her subtly now listened intently to her words, carefully considering what she said. Even those who had remained silent, uncertain about what to believe, now seemed to recognize her strength and courage. The room had transformed from one filled with doubt and challenge into one of acknowledgement and acceptance. Some of her friends approached her cautiously, almost as if stepping into a sacred space. I didn't realize," one said softly. Another nodded, eyes wide with understanding. Lena smiled gently, recognizing the impact of what she had revealed. She didn't need to speak much more. The tattoo had already communicated everything essential. It represented a life lived in secrecy, danger, and extraordinary skill. Experiences that words could never fully capture. And yet, in that silent moment, the meaning was clear to everyone. The acknowledgement she received was not fleeting. It wasn't a momentary burst of surprise or shock that would fade in a few minutes. It was profound, lasting, and deeply felt. People now understood, at least in part, the life she had lived, the risks she had faced, and the dedication she had given to missions that none of them could comprehend. Lena had bridged the gap between her secret life and the world around her, showing them just enough to command respect without compromising her principles. Even those who had been skeptical from the beginning were now forced to confront the truth. The whispers of doubt had been replaced by quiet admiration, and their curiosity was now tinged with awe. Some asked questions, seeking to understand more about her experiences, but they did so carefully, aware that they were dealing with someone extraordinary. Lena answered sparingly, giving them insight without revealing secrets that could compromise her past or the people she had worked with. Her words were measured, just enough to satisfy curiosity while maintaining the integrity of her story. In the following days, the impact of that moment lingered. People who had once dismissed her as quiet or unremarkable now treated her differently. They sought her perspective, valued her input, and even asked for guidance in situations where her unique skills and experience could provide insight. Lena's life had shifted subtly but permanently. She was no longer just another person in the room. She was someone whose history and abilities commanded respect, someone whose courage had been proven beyond doubt. Lena herself felt a sense of liberation. For years, she had carried the weight of secrecy, the burden of experiences that no one could fully understand. She had faced skepticism, mockery, and disbelief, yet she had remained patient, confident, and composed. Now, having revealed just enough to earn acknowledgement and respect, she could move forward without the constant pressure of doubt weighing on her. She could interact with those around her in a way that was honest, while still protecting the parts of her life that needed to remain hidden. The tattoo had become more than proof. It had become a symbol of her resilience, patience, and mastery of timing. It had transformed the perception of those around her, turning disbelief into respect and curiosity into admiration. Lena had always known the power of subtlety, of action over words, and now that power had been fully realized. People saw her not just as they wanted to see her, but as she truly was, strong, capable, and extraordinary. In the quiet moments after the reveal, Lena reflected on what had happened. She understood that few would ever fully grasp the dangers and experiences she had faced. Few would ever know the challenges of her missions, the fear she had felt, or the precision and skill required to navigate impossible situations. And that was fine. She didn't need full understanding from anyone. The respect she had earned, the acknowledgement she had received, and the proof she had shown were more than enough. As life returned to its usual rhythm, Lena moved forward with renewed confidence. The people around her now treated her differently, not out of fear, but out of genuine respect. She continued her daily life, interacting with colleagues and friends, yet carrying herself with the quiet assurance of someone who had lived a life few could imagine and many would never know. The tattoo remained a reminder of her extraordinary experiences, and the moment of revelation stayed in the minds of those who had witnessed it, leaving a lasting impression of courage, mystery, and undeniable truth. In the end, Lena's truth had been recognized. The skepticism had been replaced with respect, the doubt with admiration, and the teasing with acknowledgement. She had faced the challenges of disbelief with patience and precision, and she had emerged stronger, validated, and understood, at least in part, by those around her. Her life remained extraordinary, her secrets intact, and her story finally told in a way that no one could question.